Welcome into the Diamond Vols podcast. Back with you here at the Hoover Met. Once again, Tennessee coming off of a significant 4-0 win over Florida. It is significant because Tennessee advances to the SEC Tournament Championship game for the first time since 1995. A very similar stat that Tennessee began the day on, in the simple fact that Tennessee was playing in the SEC semifinal for the first time since 1995. So they'll also be playing in the SEC Tournament title game for the first time since 1995. It was a very entertaining game, but not a very dramatic game, if that makes sense in a weird way. But I will definitely dive into everything that took place and preview tomorrow's SEC Tournament Championship game, which Tennessee will face the winner of the Arkansas and Ole Miss game, which just begun. Arkansas already out to a 2-0 lead, and the title game on Sunday will begin at 3 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2. I am Ben McKee, as always, joined once again by Troy Provo-Heron of the Maryville Daily Times and Ryan Shumpert of VolQuest as well. And Ryan, the story of today, in my opinion, aside from Tennessee advancing to the tournament title game, obviously, but just within the fact that Tennessee won the baseball game, is that Camden Sewell surprisingly started the game. We all thought it would be Mark McLaughlin or maybe Elijah Pleasance or Jason Rackers. And I think we didn't mention Camden just because he hasn't started this year. Well, he started twice, but he hasn't really started that consistently in the midweek games. And he also threw 20 to 30 pitches earlier this week. So we just, at least speaking for myself, I did not view him as a starting candidate option, and he comes in and he was the story of the day, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And the fact that he had thrown on Wednesday was kind of why I didn't think he'd start. I figured he'd be available. And that kind of goes into this point, and it's what Troy said on Chad Dallas' start. He's out there through 4, maybe one more inning, 5, maybe one more inning, and he just kept on going out there. And the fact that he'd thrown earlier in the week made it a little surprising he threw so much to me, but he was really, really good. And he'd been good for the past few weeks. I think he'd given up 2 earned runs in his last 15 innings. I think that went back to the Texas A&M series. So he'd been solid, but it was another level today. And we heard Tony Vitello say postgame they kind of all year envisioned him as their 4th starter in the postseason. And it was a great first high-leverage start of the year for Camden Sewell, and you really can't ask for any more out of him against a good Florida lineup.
Yeah, and I mean, Camden Sewell and Tony Vitello both joked today that Tony told Camden after he exited that he kind of ruined the pitching plan, and obviously a good way. I would have loved to ask Tony what that plan was, but we never got that opportunity. I'll save my anger on that after the podcast ends. Yeah, he was exceptional. And I mean, Tony's kind of been a wizard this week in terms of running guys out there for maybe an inning or 2 longer than in situations that have gotten in trouble throughout the regular season. But for whatever reason here in Hoover, it's paid off. And I think we're all looking at each other in that press box thinking, okay, 4, that's good. 5's good. And then he just kept going and he kept getting better. And I don't know if you could have asked for a better start from Camden Sewell today in a situation where, I mean, he's not been built up or stretched out for a moment like that where he throws 92 pitches, I think is what he ended up throwing or something like that. It was truly remarkable. And I think if he's the guy that you're saying is your number 4 throughout this postseason and he pitches like that, oh man, I mean, Tennessee all of a sudden now looks like a team that I don't even know what the sky, like what the limit is for them in terms of what they could do regional, super regional, and potentially College World Series wise.
The sky would be winning a national championship if they get started pitching 4 days in a row. You did not say.
No, I said you said it. I wasn't going to say it.
You should. You should grow some cojones and say it, Troy, because the sky is the limit, or the sky is the roof, as Michael Jordan would say. But Camden Sewell was terrific, and I don't have the exact stats in front of me. Today we have found a basketball court in a building, so no wind, which it was a chilly day at the Hoover Met today. No wind to deal with, so that shouldn't be a problem with today's audio. There's no background noise, so I don't have the stats right in front of me, but 2 hits, 0 walks, career high, 6 strikeouts. Just because I don't have the stats in front of me doesn't mean that I don't know the stats, Troy. I did throw 6 scoreless innings, and he went back out there for the 7th, which was surprising to me because he was at 88 or so pitches, and Redmond Walsh was starting to throw in the bullpen, and he would throw while Camden was pitching, but the moment Tennessee would go to the plate to hit, he would sit down and not do anything. So him going back out there for the 7th was surprising to me just because he had thrown earlier in the week. But Camden Sewell was awesome, and he did hit that first batter of that 7th inning. But that batter, Judd Fabian, should have been retired, honestly, because there was a pop-up right in front of the Florida dugout that kind of Luke Lipsius and Connor Pavoloni looked at each other and didn't really communicate very well or couldn't see it or whatever. That should have been an out, first out of the inning, and then who knows, maybe Camden finishes off the inning. But Redmond comes in, works around that hit by pitch, gets a line out to Evan Russell in left field, gets a ground ball, and then I think a strikeout to get out of the inning. And then Sean Hunley comes in for the 8th and 9th inning. Typical Sean Hunley things in the 8th inning. Runs into a little bit of trouble in the 9th inning, not his fault. You had a weak ground ball that maybe a little miscommunication amongst the infielders, but a weak ground ball that found an awkward spot and allowed Florida to reach with no outs. And then the next batter hits one sky high into right field, and Jordan Beck loses it in the sun. So you're looking at it. Tennessee's up 4-0 in the bottom of the 9th. And Ryan, I believe your comment was only Tennessee could do this or something along.
Always makes it interesting.
Yes, Tennessee always makes it interesting. But Frank Anderson comes out, makes a mound visit. The magical Frank Anderson, and Sean Hunley just goes to work as he typically does and gets a ground ball right after the Frank Anderson mound visit. Jake Rucker steps on third for the force out, throws it across the diamond to first for the second out of the inning in a double play that eventually led to Tennessee winning the game. So Sean Hunley doing Sean Hunley things once again.
I think that was one of my biggest takeaways of the game was Vitello was very aggressive with his bullpen. 4-run lead still went to Redmond Walsh and Sean Hunley, but it completely, it worked out perfectly. Redmond Walsh threw 12 pitches in the 7th inning, should be available to go multiple innings tomorrow. And then Sean Hunley pitches 2 innings. He has an error from Jake Rucker in there. He has the weak hit ground ball that had been talked about that looked exactly like the ball against South Carolina last week for a hit. And then an easy out that Jordan Beck can't find. And he still throws 21 pitches and gets 6 outs. I mean, that efficiency is just remarkable. And you would think he has to be available again tomorrow as well. And, the players talked about it post-game. Tony talked about it post-game. We talked about it last week. I mean, Sean Hunley just doesn't get rattled at all. In any situation, he is so calm and collected, and you saw that again. Some bad luck, some bad defense, some bad help from his defense. That wasn't a problem for him. He just went out there and kept on throwing strikes, kept on hitting his spots, and he didn't allow it. I said it always gets interesting. He didn't allow it to get very interesting, immediately getting that double play, and then from there, you knew Tennessee was in a good spot.
I have a couple thoughts. One, Tony Vitello is never going to give a Tennessee reliever a clean inning to pitch out of. That's number one. And number two, I think Frank Anderson carries opposing GIDPs in his pocket, and whenever he walks out there, he just hands one to the pitcher, and there you go, you get a double play.
Explain what a GIDP is for the good people.
A ground into double play.
Okay, I'm aware of what a GIDP is, but there may be somebody new to baseball who's listening for the first time, Troy. I know you're really emotional right now because Manchester City is about to lose to my Chelsea team in the Championship League title game. But to your point, Frank Anderson is a magician when he comes out for some mound visits.
And number three, there are some people on this beat, Mike Wilson, who have kind of maybe talked, don't believe in this bullpen as much, but the truth of the matter is Tennessee might not have a Kevin Kopps. They might not have a Landon Sims. But whenever Tony Vitello turns to the best arms in this bullpen, the result is the same. Tennessee ends up winning the game for the most part. And so this bullpen has done this throughout the year and game in, game out, and they did it again today. And I think just overall with the pitching staff, when you look at what they've done this week to this point, 5 earned runs allowed in 33 innings, I mean, that's incredible. And you have to feel really good about whoever goes on the mound right now because it just seems like whoever they throw out there is going to give you a good outing.
And the bats weren't on fire today. They didn't rack up double-digit hits. At least I didn't see the final tally. 8, says Ryan.
If you don't give up any.
That's right. You only have to score 1 run if you don't give up any. But they weren't hitting balls left and right like they had been the last 3 or 4 days, Ryan. But the offense was still efficient. They made Florida's pitchers work, and I'll have to go back and look at the runners in scoring position, what they hit in those situations. I imagine it wouldn't look that pretty because it felt like Tennessee had many opportunities to break the game wide open, and they just weren't able to.
Yeah, and I would say credit to Tennessee. I think they got 3 of their 4 runs with 2 outs and two big 2-out hits from Drew Gilbert and Evan Russell that drove in runs. But yeah, it wasn't a huge day from the offense, and they got 4, I think, all on the Florida starter, and then he was a bullpen guy who hadn't thrown, I think, just 17.1 innings on the year coming in. And then you got 2 of Florida's better arms out of the bullpen, and Christian Scott and Trey Van Der Wide. So both those guys, for the most part, really kept Tennessee at bay. Christian Scott, I thought, was really good. Just gave up 1 hit in a little over 3 innings. So Tennessee's offense wasn't great today, but they got some hits when they needed it. And like Troy just said, you only need 1 run when your pitching is as good as Tennessee was today. And certainly wasn't a bad outing by Tennessee's bats or anything like that.
Yeah, I do want to say this. It's kind of like Alabama. They maybe didn't look great in terms of the run column, but they did put a charge into a few balls. I mean, you could argue if the wind's not ripping around, Jordan Beck hits 2 home runs today. I mean, the double he hits was a very long ball, and I mean, the fly out that he had to left. I mean, I think on a given day with no weather conditions, that ball's out of the park. And so I think they did put a charge into a few of them. Got unlucky with weather conditions, but like I said, I think you only need to score 1 when your team's pitching as well as Tennessee is right now, and they scored 4.
And again, the story of the game was Camden Sewell, so all you had to do was score 4. And as you just pointed out, Troy, if you're not allowing any runs, all you need is 1. And Tennessee had plenty of runs on Saturday afternoon at the Hoover Met to advance to the SEC Tournament Championship game. I'm going to assume that Tennessee will be playing Arkansas. I would kind of be. So now it's 4-0.
No, it was 2-0 when we left. So whatever it is now.
Interesting. Maybe Troy will one day realize that when you record a podcast and you don't have the mic in front of your face, don't say anything so that people can actually hear what's being said. But Troy pointing out that Arkansas is up early on Ole Miss. And again, I would be very surprised, as I imagine you all would be, if Tennessee doesn't play Arkansas tomorrow. And Ryan, you've got the storylines between Tennessee and Arkansas, just with how things happened in Knoxville and Tony Vitello and Dave Van Horn, the 2 best teams in the SEC, in my opinion, going head-to-head for the title. You have the storylines, and because of how the pitching today went with Camden Sewell, I think Camden Sewell put Tennessee in a really good spot from a pitching standpoint to give it its best effort tomorrow against what I am going to assume is Arkansas.
I'll start by saying I wouldn't be surprised if Ole Miss wins that game. They've been playing really good all week, and I'm not positive at how much pitching Arkansas has left. But I agree, Arkansas is definitely the more likely one. And, yeah, I think it's a fitting matchup. You go look back, that Sunday rubber match in that series was impromptu the SEC championship game in a regular season. Tennessee would have won that game. They would have tied for the top of the SEC with Arkansas, and obviously would have had the tiebreaker. So the storyline is perfect, and I think most people all year would have said Vanderbilt and Arkansas were the 2 best teams in SEC, but I kind of disagree with that now. I might have even thought that going into the weekend, but the way Tennessee's pitching has come together the past few weeks, the way Tennessee's bats are clicking, Vanderbilt obviously has that firepower, but their lineup has been much more inconsistent, and I think it's hard to say Tennessee and Arkansas haven't been the best 2 teams. And like you said, storylines abound in that one, and it should produce some fun baseball if it happens. And if not, Tennessee Ole Miss should produce some fun baseball because the Rebels have played really well all week.
No surprise Ryan is saying this as he has worn his Ole Miss colors today and yesterday. Troy, your thoughts on what you think will take place tomorrow in relation to who Tennessee will play in the title game?
Yeah, well, I honestly think if you're Tennessee, you want Arkansas. Like them, I think, I mentioned what Ryan said. I don't know what Arkansas has left pitching-wise. Ole Miss gets the benefit of having to play Tuesday, and so their ace, in theory, will be rested tomorrow in Doug Nikazi. And so I think if you're talking about the potential of Ole Miss having its best pitcher, its best pitcher available because Gunnar Hoagland is hurt, then I would almost rather face an Arkansas team that obviously is incredible at the bats, but what do they have left with arms, especially after today? Who knows? And Tennessee, like we've mentioned, in a really good situation where you'll probably have Will Heflin tomorrow. You'll probably still have Sean Hunley. You'll probably still have Red Walsh. You'll definitely have Kirby Connell. And so, those are the guys that all year have kind of put you in some really good situations to win ball games, and I don't know that Arkansas has, what they have left to be able to compete with that.
I would be stunned, and I mean stunned, if Ole Miss pitches its ace. You already did a really quick turnaround to pitch him on Tuesday. You're going to pitch him game 1 at a regional next week, and you don't know. That game could be Thursday or Friday, and then you're making it 4 straight starts that he has to have short rest on. So I would be absolutely stunned if Ole Miss goes to its ace tomorrow, if they make it.
Is it worth it, though, if it gets Ole Miss a national seed?
No, I don't think so. And I think they're too far away from that national seed anyway. Even that an SEC tournament championship would be a push to get it there. It certainly isn't worth that risk.
Here's the thing. The conversation about Ole Miss playing tomorrow is irrelevant because they're going to lose to Arkansas. And I would much rather, if I'm Tennessee, play Ole Miss than Arkansas because Kevin Kopps. The cops will be called. The cops will be called at some point in that championship game. I don't care if he throws 3 innings today against Ole Miss or pitches all 8 innings after the starter goes 1. He's pitching tomorrow. So that guy is unbelievable. Without a doubt, the national pitcher of the year. Maybe should be the national player of the year, not just the national pitcher of the year. So it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. But from Tennessee's standpoint, I really think Tennessee is in a great spot pitching-wise, given that this will be their 5th game in 5 days. And you're not going to see Blake Tidwell. You're not going to see Chad Dallas. You're not going to see Camden Sewell. I think that they'll start Will Heflin. We'll see. Maybe it's a Johnny Holstaff game, and you'll see Mark McLaughlin, Elijah Pleasance, Will Heflin. Maybe you see all those guys. But Ryan talked earlier about how efficient Sean Hunley is. Him only throwing around 20 pitches definitely makes him available for tomorrow's game if it's close late. I don't think that they'll pitch him if it's not a close game. They're not going to pitch him just to pitch him because it's the title game. After all, Sunday is technically the first day of the week, which means it is regionals week. So I think Tennessee will pitch him very carefully. Sunday is the first day of the week, Troy. You would know this if you went to church, which this is my joking way of telling you that you need to go to church. No, I'm kidding. But Tennessee has plenty of options is my point. I think if I were in charge, I would start Will Heflin. Obviously, I'm not in charge. Obviously, I was completely wrong on who I thought that they would pitch today. I did not see Camden Sewell starting, so who knows? Maybe this is the game that Mark McLaughlin starts. But I think Will Heflin will start. Ryan and I talked about that before we got to Hoover, that one of the good things about starting Will Heflin is you can start him that first day of the tournament, and then theoretically he's somewhat available on Sunday if you make it to Sunday. And what do you know? Tennessee has made it to Sunday. So I think you'll see Heflin start. I think you'll see Redmond. He's pitched, 2 innings the entire week, has been very efficient with his pitch. I think he's actually pitched like around 3 innings. I don't know. But he's been very efficient is my point. So Tennessee set up well from a pitching standpoint, and I think they have as good of a chance to win as they can. If that's your pitching in the title game after a long week of SEC tournament play and many games and taking the scenic route, going through the losers bracket of the SEC tournament to make it, I don't think that you could ask for a better situation. And a lot of credit goes to Chad Dallas, Blake Tidwell, Will Heflin, that opening game, and then Camden Sewell today for allowing Tennessee to get to that point. So that'll do it for this edition, the win over Florida edition of the Diamond Vols podcast at the SEC tournament. Day 4 has come to an end for the Vols and ends happily for the Vols. We will be back on Sunday for day 5 of Tennessee's run at the SEC tournament. You know where to follow Troy by now. You know where to follow Ryan and myself by now, but do encourage you to stay locked into the Maryville Daily Times and VolQuest as we continue to bring you coverage of Tennessee's run to the SEC tournament. We'll have plenty of updates about the SEC title game tomorrow. So for Ryan Shumpert, Troy Provo-Heron, I am Ben McKee. We'll talk to you all tomorrow.